James 1, 2 through 4 tell us to count it all joy. Now, I don't know you personally, but my guess is you've been through some hard seasons in life. You've faced a few storms. You've grieved a few things. And further, I would venture to guess that when that was happening in your life, joy was not the primary emotion you were feeling. And so that leads to the question when we look at this verse, is joy actually possible for us? Can we actually have joy regardless of the circumstances that are going on around us? Because at first glance, this verse might kind of seem insensitive. Like, how can I experience joy when I'm going through something so incredibly difficult? And at very least, this verse might seem improbable. Like, how can we actually experience joy when the world and our lives are falling apart? And so what I want to do in this video is I want to look at this verse and see what it actually means and see if we can actually find joy regardless of what we're going through. Let's start by looking at what this verse says. Count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let that perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Now we'll dive into James 1, 2 through 4 in just a minute, but before we do, I want to look at the context in which it was written, because I think that'll help illuminate a little bit more of what this verse means and how we can find this joy. So James was written by James, who is the half-brother of Jesus, and it was likely written to early Jewish Christians who were facing intense persecution. They were going through some incredible trials, and James writes them this letter to encourage them in what Jesus has done for them, and also to challenge them to continue to pursue righteous living. In other words, to continue doing what God says is best, even though the consequences for doing so might be great. And this is an incredibly practical book for us today. It's one of the most practical books in the entire Bible. It lays out some foundational principles for how we can follow Jesus better. And this letter starts off with this verse, with this command to count it all joy. And we're going to look at what this means, but I would encourage you as we do so to remember that James was writing this to people who were going through some intense storm. And so whatever you are facing in your life, whatever you will face in your life, this verse is a challenge and an encouragement that we can find joy regardless of what we're going through. Because if it was true for those Christians 2,000 years ago, that they can find joy in the midst of their persecution, we too can find joy in the midst of whatever trial we are going through. So let's take a look at what James 1, 2 through 4 actually means. And to help you better understand what this verse means, I've broken it down into a few different sections. And the first section says that we are to count it all joy when we face trials. Count it all joy when we face trials. Now, the word joy that James uses here is a word that we're familiar with. It literally means to be full of great joy. That's not really the surprising piece of this verse. The surprising piece is the source of joy. You see, in our lives, we tend to associate joy with like vacations, when our relationships are going well, when we get that job promotion, when people like us, when life is good. Our joy is rooted in our circumstances. But for the Bible, it challenges us to root our joy in something else. Because when our joy is rooted in our circumstances, joy will always be fleeting. Because it doesn't matter if you follow Jesus or not. The one thing that we all face is trials and hardships in our life. And so when our joy is rooted in something in this world, it will always be fleeting. And the message of the Bible, the challenge of the Bible, is to root our joy in something secure, which is Jesus. When we root our joy in Him, we can find joy regardless of what we are going through. And that's the message of James 1, 2 through 4, is to count it joy because our hope is in Jesus. And we can find joy in these trials. We can find joy in these hardships because God is with us. We'll see that more later. But also because our trials are producing something. God is using what we're going through to produce something good in us. And what James isn't saying here is he's not saying that our trials and our hardships, we should just be happy. We should just pretend it doesn't hurt, pretend it's not difficult. That's not at all what James is saying. What James is saying is we can find joy beyond what we're facing, beyond the storms we're going through, because we know that God will produce something of value in us. And that's what leads us to the second part of this verse, that the testing of our faith leads to perseverance. In other words, the trials and the storms that we go through, they are actually producing something. Just as fire refines gold, the storms of our life refine our faith. And gold wouldn't be shiny and valuable without that fire. And similarly, our faith won't be rich, it won't be deep if we don't persevere through these trials. That's why James is saying that we can have joy in our trials, not because we enjoy them, but because they're producing something of value. The end result is worth the pain. And I think we know this in other aspects of our life, right? I mean, if you want something in this life, you have to go through pain to get it. If you want to have a family, you have to go through the pain of childbirth to get that joy, right? If you want to lose weight, you have to go through the pain of going through the gym and rejecting maybe some foods that you want so that you can get the results that you want. See, the things in this life that are of value, we have to go through trials and hardships to get, and it's no different than our faith. And we can find joy in our trials because we know they produce something of value, and not just something of value, but something of the utmost value. So we can count it all joy because we know that God's not going to waste our trials and our hardships. Rather, he's going to do something beyond what we can imagine. And I love how James ends this passage. He says, you lack nothing. Listen, God doesn't just throw us into the deep end. He just doesn't just toss us to the lions. No, he goes with us. He goes before us. When you are in the middle of the storm, you are not alone. God is with you. He will not abandon you. He will not leave you there. He is with you through it all. And not only is he with you, he will provide for you what you need. And let me just encourage you with this too. Is not only is God with you, but he also designed you to go through life, to go through the storms with others. You need to find a community that can hold you up, that can support you, because when you enter into that storm, it can be so difficult to navigate. And sometimes you need somebody that's going to hold you up, that's going to point you to the hope you have in Jesus. And that's another reason that you can count it all joy, because not only are the storms and the hardships and the trials of this life producing something of value in you, but you don't face them alone. The creator of the universe is with you, walking beside you, holding you up, and he will bring you through it. So don't look at the immediate storm that's around you. Look to the one who is over the storm. I want to end this video by looking at 3 different ways we can apply James 1:2-4 to our everyday lives. And the first one is this: we need to shift our focus. You see, the world tells us we need all these other things to be full of joy, to find true happiness. We need him, we need her, we need cars, we need fame, a better job, we need sex, we need money, we need whatever it is. The world is telling us we need all these other things, and once we accumulate them, then we will be happy. But look at the world around us. The people who have all those things, they're not happy. It didn't bring lasting joy. I mean, sure, it might satisfy for a moment, but it's not going to bring ultimate satisfaction to our lives. And listen, not like those things are inherently bad. The problem with the things the world has to offer is that they distract us from the one who gave those things to us. And when we use those things the way God intended for us to use, they will point us back to him. And it's ultimately in God that we will find true happiness and joy. And so when we start pursuing the things of this world, what we need to do is we need to shift our focus back to God. We need to remind ourselves that these things can't bring us lasting joy. Only God can do that. So when you find yourself longing for the things of this world, when you find yourself thinking, man, I need that thing, I need him, I need her, then I will be happy, remind yourself that those things can't bring lasting joy. Shift your focus back to God. When you find that happening, pause, pray, and remind yourself that it's in God alone that you can find joy. The second way we can apply this verse is to keep God in his place. See, what often happens when we find our joy in our circumstances is we elevate these things that we think we need. Whether it be a nicer house, a job, all those things we've talked about. When we elevate those things, we're placing our joy in those circumstances. And so when the storms of life come, our joy goes out the window. And what we need to do instead is to keep God in his place. Again, those things aren't necessarily bad, they're just not ultimate things. So we need to keep God in his place. Listen, if you want joy in your life, regardless of what's happening, you need to keep God in his place, because he will not be shaken in the storms and trials of this world. All these other things will, but God will not be moved. So if you want to be able to count it all joy, keep God in his rightful place. And the final way that we can apply this verse to our lives is by prioritizing our calling over our comfort. And really, this was one of the primary messages James gave his audience. Remember, who were facing incredibly difficult circumstances. They were being persecuted. They were losing their jobs. Their family was walking away from them. In some cases, they were losing their lives for their faith. And they were able to count it all joy because they prioritized their calling over their comfort. And we need to do the same in our faith as well. So often we look at what's comfortable, what's the easiest road forward. But instead of doing that, we should look at what is God calling us to do. And that might bring us some storms, that might bring us some trials, that might bring us some difficulties, that might bring us some temporary pain. But the joy on the other side of that, the life on the other side of that is worth it. So if you want to find lasting joy in your life, you need to prioritize the calling God has put on your life. That means you listen to what his word says, you apply it. You don't listen to the wisdom of this world, you listen to God's wisdom. And listen, that might mean there's some consequences in your life, but know that those trials you go through will produce something of value. Your faith will grow, your joy will increase. So prioritize your calling over your comfort. James 1:2-4 tells us that joy is possible for us, that we can have joy despite our circumstances. And my challenge for you is to spend some time reflecting and praying on this verse, because I believe God has something incredible for you. I believe he has joy and peace and true happiness that's only found in him. So spend some time. Don't let this moment pass. Reflect on what he has for you today. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you learned something and that it challenged you to take a step in your faith. If it did, would you like this video and also subscribe to this channel so that you can stay up to date on future content that's coming out? We'll see you next time.